But anyhow, let's try and understand, what is this that we are going to learn all about, and also let's understand what are the things that we're going to cover for today's class, and based on that we'll move on. So this course basically covers more on the ETL testing point of view, how the ETL testing works, and basically how the what will be the roles and responsibilities of a ETL tester. All these things are going to be discussed as part of the course. So the major skills that we are going to understand in this thing is, in this curriculum that we're going to discuss about, basically on the DBMS and what is database, and basically what is RDBMS. So that is your relational database management system, right? So relational database management system, and basically what are the different type of databases. We'll understand the different type of databases and how to connect to them, and what are the most frequently used databases in the real-time world, and all that different type of databases that we're going to discuss. And basically, yeah, so RDBMS, different type of databases. Then we'll understand about SQL. In SQL, basically we are going to speak more on the basic queries, how to write them, and then we talk about the basically the single row functions, what we have, and multi-row functions, how to use the aggregate functions and all those. That's what we're going to understand. And single row functions, multi-row functions, and before that we'll also understand how to use the where clause in a query, and how to use the order by clause and all those things. Then we'll talk about the joins and basically the subqueries, what we have, joins, subqueries. So then we'll have on the set operators, constraints, and all those things. So these are the set operators, and I'm just giving you the list of topics that we're going to understand, so that you'll be well aware like what we're going to discuss, what set operators. Then we'll understand about the constraints. Constraints, this is what we have. And then after the constraints, we'll talk about the different other database objects like views, materialized views, and we'll also understand on the the other things like indexes, how to use it, and what is a sequence, and synonyms, what is a synonym, and how we can access how the synonym actually helps you to access the database objects. And so synonyms, and basically, right, uh, views, indexes, sequence, and synonym. And then we will talk about the the DB link, basically what is a database link and how it works, and then the data dictionary, metadata dictionary tables, how it will be there in the database. And before that, we'll also understand in the today's class how to connect to the different databases, how to connect to different databases. So we are going to understand basically how to connect to different databases like Oracle, SQL Server, and all those. Once we understand the SQL completely, then we'll go on and understand about the ETL testing. Maybe the data warehousing concepts. What is a data warehouse? What is ETL? And what is BI? And all those things. So data warehouse. And the next one that we are going to talk on the data modeling. So how the data modeling actually works, and then we'll talk about the types of ETL testing, or what is ETL testing, right? And what is ETL testing and types of ETL testing that we are going to define, uh, right? So, right, basically the data warehouse, data modeling, and what is ETL testing, and we'll talk about the types of ETL testing, right? So what we have, okay. So basically, so types of ETL testing, that's what we're going to understand. And then we'll also talk about the different use cases in the ETL testing, right? We are going to understand the different scenarios and different use cases that we are going to understand. And then we'll talk about the BI testing. Later we'll talk about the Unix commands, and then the how the scheduling works. All these things we'll discuss in detail. So these are the major things that we're going to understand, and the duration of this class will go for 6 weeks, and each week we are going to understand. So duration was basically the the 6 weeks, and each week, each weekend day, we are going to learn 2 hours. So when you say it will go for 25 to 30 hours, basically that's what we do. And each weekend day will, with a single break, will have 2.5 hours. So we'll spend around 30 hours totally in during this. So this is a overall thing. We will be having a class at the same time, and let's try and discuss um, how to let's try and start with the first thing. See, first let's focus on the what is database and how to connect to it, and then we'll come back to the different things. Okay, so assuming that all of you are starting from the basic level, so I will be starting now in explaining you about what is a database and all those things, and then we'll talk about the ways to connect and what are the tools that we use to connect to the database. So database is something that it's see, in a layman terms we call this as a database, but in general the database is in technical terms it is called as a DBMS, database management system. So we know that it's a software product, right? It's a software product which will store the data in the form of tables. It will actually store the data in the form of tables when you see that. And when the data is stored in the tables, there will be a relationship which exists between one table to other table. There will be a relationship which exists between one table to the other table. That's why this is called as a RDBMS, Relational Database Management System, as there will be a relationship exists between one table to other table. Relationship exists between one table to the other table what we have. So that's why we call them as a relational database management system. See, in RDBMS we have different vendors have a different products. Microsoft has one product, Oracle has one product, and similarly the SAP has one product, and likewise each vendor has their own database products. So all these database products basically, if you want to communicate with all these database products, you need a SQL to communicate with them. So you need basically the SQL to communicate with them. So what are the different products which you see is, let's say, Oracle database, and the version is basically most of the clients are still using 11g, and even we are going to use 11g database. And recently, not recently, the latest version is basically the 12c. And similarly, you have the MS SQL Server. This is another database from your Microsoft. So we have a 2012, still people are using 2014, and 2016 is another version which we have. And likewise, you have DB2 from IBM. I'm not sure about the versions. And you have a Teradata. So Teradata is actually 15.0 is there in the market. And before that, you have 13.1, 14.0. All these are basically the different different things what we have. So Teradata, 13.1, 14.0, 15.0, what we see. So basically, these are the different databases, and you also have Sybase, so which is basically an SAP product now, and this is also one more database. Likewise, you have databases like Greenplum and Greenplum, and you have a Netiza. Likewise, there are different RDBMS products which are available. So all these RDBMS products are basically understands the SQL. So without SQL, you cannot communicate with these databases, or you cannot store the data in these databases, or you cannot do any action without SQL. You can't do. That's why these RDBMS products are also called as a SQL databases, because using SQL only you can communicate with all these databases, and that's why we call even the SQL database, because only SQL, using SQL you can communicate with it. So basically, the tools that you actually use to connect to the different databases will vary from one database to other database. Generally, whenever you want to connect to Oracle, we use a open source tool from Oracle itself, which is called as Oracle SQL Developer. And whenever you want to connect to Microsoft SQL Server, so basically that you're going to use something called as a SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio, what we call this as a SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS we use. And for a Teradata, it is more that you use a Teradata SQL Assistant. So this is what we Teradata SQL Assistant is something which we use with respect to that. And likewise, for Sybase, we use a Rapid SQL. Rapid SQL is a tool that we use for connecting to Sybase. So for different databases, we can use different tools. But even using a SQL developer also, you can communicate with multiple databases. It doesn't restrict actually. So these are the tools that we use for connecting to any database. So basically, now, when we talk about these are the SQL databases, so as I said, without SQL you can't do anything with these databases. Now the question is about what is no SQL databases. See, when you talk about the SQL databases, this will basically store only the structured data. If you are actually distributing your data to, right, if you are distributing your data to tables and columns, then only these databases can store the data. So these databases cannot store the unstructured data. Unstructured data means maybe HTML files or XML files or PDF files, or entire the server log information I want to store, or I would like to store the review on my e-commerce website into the database. So all these kind of things cannot be actually, without arranging that into a different schema, you can't store it. So that's why nowadays most of the clients have started using, since the unstructured data is more in our day-to-day world, most of the clients have started moving towards the NoSQL databases. These NoSQL databases are capable of storing the unstructured databases, what we have, unstructured databases with respect to that. So when you talk about these unstructured data, these NoSQL databases will actually store. And maybe the information about the likes, dislikes in a Facebook, so or your LinkedIn profile, or you want to store the complete article, and you want to capture the comments in the article. So all these kind of things can be the captured and stored by the NoSQL databases. So if you see the companies like Facebook and all, they use a database called as a graphical database, which is called as a Neo4j. That is a NoSQL database, and using an SQL you can't communicate. Similarly, there are the databases like Cassandra and all, so which doesn't understand SQL, but this will understand the Cassandra query language. So likewise, you have a databases which will store the documents, images, and the videos. That is your MongoDB, and you have the HDFS, or you have even a Hive Pig, Hive Pig, or your big data modules, Hadoop modules, which it will store the data. Likewise, you have a different NoSQL databases, and all these NoSQL databases will not understand your SQL. Sorry. So basically, these NoSQL databases will not understand your SQL thing. So why we are talking about both SQL and NoSQL databases here is that when you start working on the real-time world, your entire project architecture might contain either of these databases. Your project might contain both Hive as well as an Oracle database, which could be the scenario. So likewise, these NoSQL databases are also became so popular nowadays for building the business intelligence applications. Okay, so we'll talk about it when we go to the architecture. But for time being, understand there are databases which understand the SQL. There are databases which doesn't understand the SQL. So we have both the type of databases: unstructured data or semi-structured data, documents information, anything that you would like to store. This will be captured within this. This is your NoSQL database what we have. So let's try to understand now how can I actually connect to a Oracle database and how I can start executing my SQL queries. See, in this course, I'll be focusing more on the SQL databases only, not on the NoSQL databases. Still, not all the clients in the ETL environment will use a NoSQL databases, but there are clients slowly enhancing their architectures basically to use a NoSQL databases as well. Okay, let's try to understand. Uh, right. So let's try to understand how to connect to the Oracle database because we are going to use this more. See, Oracle database will contain the two components. So one is your Oracle client and basically the Oracle server. So there will be two things, which is your Oracle client and the Oracle server, what we have with respect to that. So Oracle client and the Oracle server. So basically, as a developer, you can install Oracle client in your machine and you can connect to the Oracle server. So let me give you the scenario how it works in the real time. So this is very important. More than a technical things, you should understand the process. Okay. So let's say this is the database what we have. So which I call it as your Oracle database. Let's say this is your Oracle server. Let's say it is 11G server and you are actually installing it in some 82 box. Let's say, it is being installed in the it is being installed in your 82 box, whatever we have. Let's say 82 is a machine where you installed it. And let's say if you want to connect to this Oracle database, in this Oracle server, I install the database and every database will have a name. So that name, I call it as a ORCL, whatever we have. So now I'm installing the Oracle client here. Let's say you install the client tool. So if you install the client tool, by default, you get one environment called as a SQL plus environment, right? So it is actually called as a SQL plus. So SQL plus is a Oracle proprietary environment using which you can connect to your Oracle server. So one is that you can connect to the database by using Oracle server Oracle client SQL plus environment. Another thing is that you can also use the different tools to connect to the Oracle database. So what are the tools that we use? So as I said, you'll use a SQL developer. So I'm using a shortcut here, and you can use a Toad in the real time. So Toad is another tool which helps you to connect to Oracle database, and you have something called as a PLSQL developer. So this is also one tool which is used to connect to the Oracle database. So whenever you want to connect, either you can connect using the SQL plus environment which is available, or you can use any of the tools and then connect it. See, whenever you want to connect to any database, see the installation and configuration of all the things on your server level is done by the Oracle database administrator. Database administrator will take care of all those activities. But as a developer or as a tester, you don't need to install the database or you don't need to configure the database in fact. So whenever you want to connect to the database, few things that you need to request from either a database administrator or the Oracle developer or an Informatica developer. So host name is going to be, let's say you need to know the host name to which where the database is installed, let's say 82 box, and the port in which it is going to load the, where the database is running, and you need to know the database name. See, every time you configure one database, database name is going to be, let's say, ORCL, database name is ORCL, and you must know the username and the password, username and the password. So this is basically the details which you need to know. But here we are going to, when you want actually practicing, the administrators here, they will help you to install the Oracle database and they will give you the username and password to connect. So these details you must know before you want to connect to any database basically. So whether it is a SQL Server or Oracle or a Teradata, database name and these things is essential for logging in. So basically, now, when you talk about the database, database can contain a group of schemas, or it's the group of multiple schemas which we can define with respect to that. So basically, when you want to define, let's say I have a database. Okay, I hope I'm not confusing here. So till this, I hope you're clear, like how to connect to the database. Either you can install these tools or install a client and connect. For connecting to these things, you must know these details. Okay, so let's try to first create a connection and logging into this tool. See, I have already downloaded a Oracle SQL developer, and admin team will help you to download the SQL developer. So you can use SQL developer and connect it. Just it's a kind of a plug and play software. Okay, so all you need to do is just download and start using it. No needs to install or anything. Okay, I just have a shortcut here. So I'm just opening the so basically right. So now we need to basically connect to the database. So for connecting to the database, what I do is I'll just delete it. This is a SQL developer and you need to create a connection here, right? So how to create a connection in the SQL developer? Just click on this plus button and enter the connection name as maybe, I want to connect to, let's say they have given me the Karthik schema. So I'm just giving it as, let's say, SQL practice. For practicing SQL, I'm creating a connection and you can give the username, whatever they have provided you, and the password, whatever this. So you can save the password for future reference. Let's say the host name 192.168.1.82 and the service name is going to be the ORCL which it is there. So try to test it. For some reason it is not connecting. Okay, let me re-enter the password. Okay, so I enter the password back. So now I'm able to connect. So if you enter the username, password and the host name and all those things and then click on test, so you're able to connect to the database properly. So now you tested it, let's say save and click on connect. Now it will open up the workspace where you can start executing your queries, So that is what will happen. So this is the browser. This is called as a, the SQL developer browser where we can view all the objects and everything from here. Okay. So before stepping onto that, I would like to give you the definition of schema means. It's a schema is like in one database we can have any number of schemas. Okay. So what I'm trying to come at is, let's say you have a ORCL is one database. Under ORCL we can have basically the under ORCL we can have the so basically this is what we have. Let's say when you see each, one database can contain any schemas. Let's say HR is one schema, Karthik is another schema, or Scott is another schema. Likewise, you can have any number of schemas. In each schema, they can have their own objects. HR user can have their own objects. Maybe they can create a tables like EMP, DEPT, LOC. Likewise, they can create any number of tables. Even Karthik user can create their own tables. Let's say student, or let's say call it as STD, address, and all these things. These are the different kind of the schemas, and each schema can contain its own tables, its own database objects which could be there. So basically in Oracle, schema and the username both are same, but when you go to the other databases, your hierarchy will change. So schema is called as a group of database objects or package of database objects as a single unit, package of database objects which we have. So under this, when you say this package of database objects, you can have your own tables and views and maybe the indexes and let's say the sequences. Likewise, you can have your own, the set of database objects under one schema. So one schema can contain its own database objects, what we have. So basically now whenever you want to connect to it, so you need to know like from which schema you're actually querying the table and using which user you connected it. So these are the basic details you need to understand when you start working. Basically your developer might say that, okay, employee table is there in the HR schema. So you should understand that what is a schema and what is a database. So this is how you can connect to the database using this. So similarly, this is a way you connect it to your Oracle database. And maybe if I look for your any other database, like let's say I want to connect to maybe the 86 or 68. That is where we have our SQL server installed. I'm not sure if it is correct. Let's see. So I just want to show you even how to connect to the SQL Server database as well. I don't think this is correct. Okay, so maybe I'll just show you this thing tomorrow in case I'll find out the IP address of that where that SQL Server is installed, and this is how you can connect. See, when we talk about these SQL is referred as a structured query language, and this is a language which is invented by IBM in order to interact with your databases. So this structured query language is actually a group of commands. The structured query language is the group of commands, and where we actually use those commands to communicate with your database. So this SQL query language or a structured query language is divided into 5 different types or 5 different categories which we have. So one is called as a data definition language, so which is called as a DDL, and another one is your data manipulation language, which you call it as DML, and the other one is called as a data retrieval language. So data retrieval language, which is called as a DRL, data retrieval language, and the other one maybe when you look data definition language, data manipulation language, data retrieval language. So the other one is called as your transaction control language to manage your transactions and everything. This is your transaction control language, which is called as a TCL. And the next one is about, so transaction control language, and the other one is called as a data control language, so which is called as a DCL, data. This is to manage the permissions between the 2 different users and within the database or within the objects. So we use a data control language. So this is a classification. So for each and every language, we have a different commands which we use for doing it. So when you talk about the DDL has a different commands like create. So this is used to define the objects. Whenever you want to define any objects in the database, if you want to define any object, maybe like a table or a view or any object like table or a view or a synonym or an index, anything, then we use these commands. So what are the commands for data definition language? Create, and basically you call it as alter, and maybe the drop, and then we call this as a truncate, whatever we have. Create, alter, drop, and the truncate, whatever we call it using this. And when we talk about the data manipulation language, so this is to manipulate the data or modify the data within your tables and everything. So to modify the data, we have few things like insert, which is used to add a row to a table, update, which is used to update the information on the table, and then the delete, which helps you to delete it from the table what we have. So that is about your insert, update, and then the delete, what are the commands. So DRL is for retrieving the data, means reading the data. Whenever you want to read the data from the tables, then we call it as a data retrieval language. So for reading the data, we use a select statement for reading the data. So that is your data retrieval language what we have. So when you say transaction means the group of your DML commands, right? Group of DML commands. So together is actually called as a group of DML commands, which we call this. If you are executing a group of DML commands in one session, that is called as a transaction, right? So basically, when you want to control the transaction, either you want to apply the changes or you want to roll back or undo the changes, then we go for a transaction language commands. That is your commit, and then let's say rollback is another one what we have. So this is your transaction control language commands what you see. So when you talk about the data control language, so which is basically like a grant and revoke. Grant and revoke are the two commands which we use, that is your grant and this revoke. Basically grant is used to give the permission and revoke is used to take the permissions from an object or from a user. So these are the commands which you use. So if you understand how to use all these commands extensively with the different use cases, then you'll become like a, the medium level expert in the basically in the SQL level, right? So these are the different commands what we have. Now I'm going to explain about all these commands, what is it used for and how we can use it, right? So far any questions? I would like to hear from you guys if you have any questions on these so far. Right, are you clear so far? You can even use a chat window to discuss with me. And if you ping me, I can read out the question and then answer for you. Right. Yes, Keshav, please go ahead. Right. Okay. So what is mean by a schema here? Okay. So what I was telling was schema is nothing but a group of database objects together. If you are defining in a single unit, that is called as a schema. So within the schema, I can define any number of tables. I can define any number of views or indexes, any database object you can define it. That is like a single unit in your database, or it's like a part of your database or a group of together if you're creating that as a single unit, or it's just like a part of your database, right? So if you say that database is a full of room and one room together is called as, the one room is called as a basically the schema. So it's just a single unit, suppose let's say if I start representing it, maybe if you think in terms of storage, let's say HR schema will hold the data till this, right? And maybe when you talk about this, let's say this will talk about here and maybe the HR schema, and let's say these are like a part of the schema. Here you can call it as this as HR schema, this as a SCART schema, And this is some, it can have any number of schemas, but I just divided this entire database into 4 schemas. That's what I mean when you say schema means. It's a group of database objects together. If you're creating in a single unit as a package, that is called as a schema, right? So there is no restriction what object you have to create, all those things. It depends upon the privilege, basically what is being assigned by your database administrator, right? You're clear, Keshav, now? You're good? Okay, right. So let's move on. And now I'm going to explain about how to use these commands basically. How can I use these SQL commands and how can I start creating a tables, adding a data now. So those things we'll talk about. See, whenever you're creating a table, right? So basically, um, whenever you're creating a table, first a few more things you need to understand before we talk about the table. So what do you mean by the data type in Oracle? Let's say, what do you mean by data type? um, Data type in your SQL or any database. So data type is something that which will categorize your data. See, when you're storing the data, you have different forms of data, isn't it? You might have to store the date information, or you might have to store the character information, or you might have to store the number information or a salary, all these things. So basically the data type is something that which will categorizes your data in that column what kind of data that you want to store. So that is basically the definition of your column. So that is called as a data type. So these data types will vary from one database to the other database when you call. It will vary from one database to the other database. So basically when you look at the different data types, we have a character which will basically store the fixed length characters what we have. Basically the fixed length characters, what we call it, fixed length character. And you have something called as a varchar, which is basically about the variable length characters what we see, variable length character. And the another thing is about the character and the variable length character. So the next thing is on the how we, variable length characters, this will store your alphanumeric characters, alphanumeric characters, and this one will store only the fixed length character, only the character, it doesn't store the any alphabets whatever we have. So this is your varchar, and the next one is about the, you have a data type and whatever date. This will store only the date information, and similarly if you want to store the number information, we can use a number data type. Likewise, you have a boolean for storing the true, false and the null values. Likewise, in a database you can have, you have more data types, but it is just to categorize your data. It is just to categorize your data, what you see. So let's try to understand now how to define a table within the database. So, right. So when you want to create a table, right? So first you need to understand what information you're going to store in it, and how many number of columns, right? How many number of columns, and what is the data type of each column. That is what you need to define. So if you look at the Excel, right? So when you say table, it is nothing but rows and columns. So horizontal representation is called as a row, and vertical representation is called as a column. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All these are all like columns, and 1, 2, 3. Whenever you represent the number, that is actually a row, right? So let's try to create a table. Now I want to create a table to store the information about the students. So to which course they are actually joining, and what is the fee that they are paying, what is their email address, and what is the name, and what is the ID that, what is a student ID and all. I want to store it. So how can I create a table? So this is a command. See, all these syntaxes you need to practice, then only you'll understand it. Okay. Now I'm using a command called as a create table. Okay. Now when you look at the basically the table name, say before going into that, I want you also to understand how to name a database object. See, any database object, whether it is a table or a view, or what is the criteria to name the database object? Basically, the database object name cannot be more than 30 characters, right? Cannot be more than 30 characters what we have, right? It cannot be more than 30 characters. And it cannot be more than 30 characters. And similarly, when you look at this one, always database object name must start with an alphabet. I can't just name a table called as 123 ABC, which is not possible. It must start with an alphabet, whatever we have. So basically alphabet. And also special characters which are allowed are hash, and you can use underscore, and you can use a dollar symbol. So these are the special characters we can use. So valid example for a table is, let's say, valid example for naming any table. So it must start with an alphabet. Let's say student underscore some today's date, if you want to open 0402 2017, what we have with respect to that. So basically, this is what we have. So create table. So basically that's what I'm going to create a table. I want to store the name of the student names and then the course fee and everything. Let's say student ID, what we have. So this is basically about the number of 12, and student ID and name. Let's say this is, we call this as a varchar2 of, let's say 50, what we have, varchar2 of 50. And let's say you want to store the name of the course, right? Course, which is, I call it as, let's say varchar2 of 50, right? And let's say the joining date. So you want to store the join date, like when they have joined. So join date, also this is a date column, right? And so join date and all these things what we see. And the next one is basically about the fee, how much they're paying or not. So that we call it as, let's say, number of 10 comma 2, whatever we have. So let's say when you say number of 10 comma 2, maximum you can store 10 digits, and after a decimal you can have a two characters or a 2 digits precision. And when you say varchar2 of 50, it can max store the alphanumeric characters what we with respect to that. So let's try to run this. To execute a query within the SQL developer, either you can use Control Enter or you can use F9 option to execute it. So I'm using Control Enter. Let's say now this is created. See, basically when you're creating any object, another object should not exist with the same name in the database. If it is existing with the same name, then it will not allow you to create it. So suppose, let's say if I try to create the same table again in the same schema, it will throw the error. See, it is throwing the error saying that name is already used by an existing object. That means this name is already used, and you cannot, name is already used by an existing object, what we call. So this is about how to create a table. So we just created a table, and if you see now, if you try to query, when you want to read the data, what is the command that you use? Select star from and then give the table name. So basically this is what we have, and so basically this is what you see. Now let's say student ID, name and course, and you have a join date and the fee. There is no data within this. So by default, whenever you create a table, it's a brand new table, right? There is no data. Now, how to add the data to the table? By using an insert command. So insert command we are going to use for adding a data. So let me Insert is actually used to add a row. So we say insert into, and then the table name which we have, insert into table name. Right, you have a student ID, right? So you have a student ID what we have, and then the name, and let's say you need to have a value for a course and join date and the fee. So this is a columns which we would like to pass on, let's say fee, and this is basically the values. Now I would like to add the student ID as Andre, and let's say Ravi. Sorry. So whenever you are adding string values, you must enclose in the single quotes. Okay, that is a syntax that you need to follow. Let's say Ravi, and basically the course, let's say ETL testing is a course, ETL testing. So you just define, and maybe the join date. Let's say they have joined in the last week. So when you say last week was basically last week was your 28th of January 2007. So you can define a date like this: DDMON So YYY format you can use, and then the fee is going to be the, let's say 400 point, let's say 82. So these are this many dollars. Let's say this is how you can define, and then add it. Now I have totally 5 columns, and I inputted 5 values: 1, 2, course, and then the join date, and then this. So if the number of columns are more and values are less, you'll get an error. If the number of columns is less and values are more also, you'll get an error. So you need to make sure that the number of columns in this are matching. So if you want to apply these changes to permanently to the database, then commit is something that which will apply the changes permanently to the database what we have. So when you run it, now the data is committed. So what we have, and the data is actually committed. This is what we have. So now the data is good. I mean, we just added one record. Similarly, if you would like to add some more records, maybe let's say 101, and I call it as, let's say, Praveen. So Praveen, and so I call this as SEO analyst. I mean SEO, search engine optimization course. Let's say this guy has joined today. If you want to add today's date, you can always use sysdate. Sysdate will give you the current date and time, and the fee is, let's say, 300 USD. So this is what is a fee. So if you'd like to add it, now execute, control enter, row is added. If you'd like to commit, apply the changes, use F11. That is also fine. Now I have added it. So overall, we added 2 records. So I'll be able to see the 2 records which have been added to my table. Similarly, see, when you're adding a data, it is not necessary that you should add value for all the columns when you're doing it. You can even skip the columns. Let's say I don't want to add a value for fee now, and later I'll update it. Let's say 102, and name is, let's say, Krishna, right? And the course which they've joined is, let's say, digital marketing, right? So digital marketing is a course, and let's say maybe the next week they're joining. Let's say you can give even future date. So next week is going to be, let's say, 11 basically the 11 February 2017. So this is what is a date what we have. So try to insert it. Now I'm not having I'm not adding a value for your basically the fee column. So suppose if you're not providing any value while adding a data, that becomes a null. Null means it is an unassigned value. So while inserting the data, if you're not assigning any value, then that is called as a null. So null is always, it is unassigned or not applicable value. Unassigned or a not applicable value when you do that. So let's try to basically unassigned value or a not applicable when you say that. So let's try to use how basically this is your unassigned value or a not applicable. If you're not assigning any value, that becomes null. So let's say I want to insert another record. This time I don't want to even add a value for, let's say, 103, and you have, let's say, Kishore, and this you call it as Linux admin, right? Linux admin. And I don't want to even add a date for a joining date also, right? Joining date also, I would like to not to add the date of this. Okay. So when you try to add, here I have 3 columns and 3 values. So try to add the data and commit, you can commit the changes. So now if I try to query this, basically we'll have 3 records, but for one of the record, we haven't added any data for this. So let's say this is your join date, and this you have it as a fee column, whatever you see. So basically the student ID, name, course, and the join date. So these columns doesn't have a data because we are not added anything. So suppose, let's say you have a table without, I mean, if you want to change anything, then we need to use an update statement. So update is something that which will help you to update the data in the specific columns, or you can update for all the columns also. So update is used to update it. Suppose, let's say this guy has changed the mind, and now I need to change the course, joining date, and fee for this row. How do I do that? So which table you're updating? Update, and this is a table. Let's say set, and I want to change the course from Linux admin. Let's say this guy I've changed to VMware admin, or VMware admin what we have. So course value is changed, and let's say the join date, this guy is decided to join from today. Let's say sys date, I can pass, and you can even define a fee. Fee is, let's say, $1,000. Okay. So now when you try to run this, basically it will update for all the rows. See, if I try to run it now, 4 rows are updated because you haven't specified what row to be updated. If you try to see now, for all the rows, the data would have been updated. See, all the rows, the data is updated. So that's why we need to be very careful when we are using an update statement and the delete statement. You should always write a appropriate where clause using it. You should always write the appropriate where clause with respect to that. Now, I don't want to commit these changes, and I can do the rollback. Rollback is like a undoing the changes what we have. So just roll back, and when you try to see this, basically this is what we have with respect to that. So student ID, name, course, and the join date and the fee, whatever we have. So basically now I want to update only for this row. So then we can qualify that with a where clause. When I say where student ID is equal to 103, then wherever the student ID is equal to 103, only that row will be updated, and remaining all the other rows will be not impacted by this update statement. Now the row is updated, and commit the data what we have with respect to that. So this is how you can actually use a update statement. Whenever you want to update anything, any row or multiple rows, you can always use an update statement, and accordingly you have to define a where clause to update the rows. So update is used to modify the data in the columns. Similarly, let's say delete. Delete is a command which helps you to delete a row from a table. So let's say delete, and from, let's say delete from. So I want to, if you say delete from the table name, it will delete all the rows from the table, all the rows from the table. And this is like a DML command. You can always undo it. See, all the rows are deleted. I'm just undoing the changes. I'm rolling back it, which means it will undo the change. It is not committed. Basically, it is not committed. So when you want to delete only the specific row, that time you can even use the delete command as well. So delete from, and let's say where your student underscore ID is equal to, let's say, 103 what we have. So when you try to run this, basically this is what it is. Like, let's say one row is deleted with respect to that. So row is deleted if you would like to commit it. If you commit it, now the row is permanently deleted and you can't undo the change. Once you commit it, you cannot take it back. I mean, you can't get that back. So this is a way that you can apply the delete statement with respect to that. So now we need to talk about the truncate. Like basically, what do you mean by truncate? See, truncate is like a DDL command, which it will actually remove all the records from the table, but the table is not deleted. It will not delete the table, but it will delete all the rows from the table, and it cannot be undo. I mean, you cannot undo the changes done by the truncate. So if you see truncate table, everything is truncated. Now, if you would like to go and see the data is nothing here. Everything is removed. So can I undo the changes done by the truncate? We cannot do that. Even I can do undo, but nothing will happen because it's a DDL statement. DDL statement are always auto commit. Your commit and rollback. Okay, let me be very clear here. You can apply the commit and rollback only with the DML statement, not with the DDL statement, because commit and rollback, commit and rollback can be applied only with the DML statements. What are the DML statements? Insert, update, and delete. You can't use it with a create, drop, alter, and then the any other thing other than insert, update, delete. You can't use a commit and rollback, or it will not work. First of all, you can still use it, but it will not be effective. So that is one important thing we need to remember. So basically now if I want to insert the data for all these columns, I mean all these rows one more time. So basically let me do it. See, another important thing is that whenever you want to execute the group of SQL statements together, basically what would be the process? Now, I want to execute all these insert statement at a time. How can I do that? So just select it and run a script. Script is nothing but the group of SQL statements is called as a script. So when I run it, now all the things are there. It is committed the data. So if I go and check now what is the data here. So basically this is what the data I have. So likewise you can actually add the data, update the data, delete the data and all those things. Now we need to understand about two more commands. One is called as a alter and the drop. See, alter is basically is used to modify the structure of the table. So whenever you want to add the column, add column, and basically the add the column or modify the column data type, add the column or modify the column data type, or if you want to remove a column, if you want to remove the existing column also we can do, and you can add a new column. All those things can be done. Suppose let's say I want to remove the column join date. Okay, so how can I do that? Alter table, and this is a table name, and you want to drop that column. Removing the column is nothing but the dropping it. So drop, let's say the column name, and you have something called as a, let's say, join date. I want to remove this column. So what I can do is just say this, it will remove the column. So now if I go and query it, basically my table will have only 4 columns or whatever, right? So basically that's how it is done. If you want to add a column also, you can do that. Suppose let's say the same column I would like to add it one more time. So basically alter table name, and let's say you want to add a column, so add, and the join date is going to be the date option what we have with respect to that. So basically this is what we have. So now this is altered. So when you try to see, basically let's say select star from, if you see the column would have been added, it is dropped and then added. So using an alter, you can change the structure of the table anytime, right? That is the use of alter. When you say drop will remove the data as well as a table structure. Entire thing about the table will be deleted when you use it. Let's say drop table and then the table name what we have. So when you try and write it, so the table will be dropped with respect to that. So now if I go and verify about this table, nothing will be there. So drop will remove the table as well as the data both. Remove the table and data both, and it cannot be undo. I mean, you cannot undo the changes. See, often in the interviews, they'll ask you what is difference between a delete and you have something called as a truncate, and then maybe the drop what we have. So delete is more like to remove the rows from the table, or you can remove the rows, and can be rolled back because it is a DML statement. We can roll back, and the structure of the table still remain. Even though the data is deleted, the structure of the table still remain in the database. What we have still remain in the database when you do that. And when you say truncate, it will remove the rows from the table and cannot be rolled back, and the structure of the table still remain in the database. I hope you're understanding what is the difference between cannot be rolled back. Once I delete it, even if you undo it also, it can. So drop will remove data and table both, and this cannot be rolled back when you see that. Let's basically it cannot be rolled back. So this is basic things about your SQL commands. So what is the use of create, alter, drop, insert, update, delete, and then the commit and the rollback. So these are the commands what we talked about. So in the future, I mean in the later classes, we are going to understand basically how to use the grant and revoke commands. Anyhow, we'll understand that when we go to the later classes. In the later classes, we'll understand about how to use them with respect to that. So this is pretty much about the basic introduction of your SQL, right? So any questions so far? So are you good so far about how to define the tables, connecting to the database and all those things? Right. So, so I'm not hearing anything from you guys. So shall I understand that you're following everything, or is there any, I mean, I hope the pace of the class is fine. Maybe I'm not going too fast here. Please leave your feedback so that it will be better for us to plan the next classes. You know, if you be silent in case if you're not following, then it will be difficult in the future classes as well. Right. All right. So this is pretty much what we have, and this is just the first class. And from tomorrow onwards, we'll start spending more time, maybe 2 hours or 2.5 hours. I'm not sure. I think even some of you have not confirmed for the training. So basically, you can just talk to your representatives and make yourself enrolled in the course, and then we will start with the first few things on the SQL in the tomorrow's class. So I'm stopping it for now, right? So to practice yourself, follow up with the admin. They will actually set up the virtual machine in your computer, right? They'll set up the virtual machine. In this virtual machine, you will contain the SQL developer and the Oracle database, both are installed. SQL developer, Oracle database 11G, both are installed in this virtual machine. Once you turn on the virtual machine, the SQL developer will be there, and the admin team will provide you the username and password to create the connection and practice the SQL. See, when you log into this, you can use the host name as maybe the local host because database is installed in your local machine, and the port, I think the most of the time it is going to be 1521. You can use the port as 1521, and the database name is your ORCL. You can use ORCL as your database name, and basically the DB name, and then the username and password. Username and password you can use HR and HR in the HR and HR basically in the your virtual machine. So you're connecting to HR schema, and you can start practicing all these queries whatever we discussed today, and right from the creation of table, adding the data, modify the data, or if you would like to create a new tables on your own and add it, update. So all these syntaxes you need to understand before we proceed with the next set of chapters, right? So answered your question, Keshav? So this virtual machine has to be installed, and follow up with admin team maybe after the class if they're available now. So they'll install it and then make it available for you, right? So